deal with Q with the, is it like low light,
Yes.
up light?
Yes, the lighting, poor lighting. Yep. Double check it. I'm pretty sure. Inadequate lighting.
Inadequate.
Okay. Whoops.
When it comes to something like this, I really encourage everyone, when you go to your senior that you're taking care of, look at everything with fresh eyes. Some of the homes that we go into are homes that we grew up in, and that's just the way they are. We know this board is loose and that and everything, but we're really preparing for the what ifs. I've been in homes that there's, I don't want to use the word hoarder, but there's clutter. And that can be a hard conversation because that clutter didn't happen by accident. So you have to be brutally honest with your senior, with your loved ones, and say, what are we going to do? Don't be surprised if you get arguments. That I have had more arguments about throw rugs. You would think they were the bridge to youth. No, you have to. It brings the two rooms together, everything. So it is a matter of looking at every home, that home you go into, even if it's your own, with fresh eyes and say, what about? We cannot turn gravity off. We cannot undo some things. So where are the potential problems and what can we do to alleviate or decrease the potential of the problem? And it's the fresh eyes that to me is so important, because I've been the guy that put the newspaper there, and then the newspaper there, and then the newspaper there, and then I realized that's too many newspapers there. So day-to-day can lead to problems, and it's a good idea to look in fresh.
I'll just go over the couple letters that we didn't get. They're saying letter A is disequilibrium. So if we're a little bit off balance, that's going to be a fall risk. Visual deficits is letter B. And then you might want to notice her glasses are way over there too. So I don't know if that would help with letter B. Dysrhythmias or orthostatic hypotension. So if she has something with her heart, or if she goes to stand up too quickly and she's dizzy, she could have a fall. Degenerative joint disease. So that would affect her transfers and being able to move around. And then they don't like a robe either. That's too loose fitting clothing they could get tied up in. We got the footwear, the pets, the rugs. They're also letter I is either Parkinson's or dementia can be a risk as well. And I think we got the rest of them. Oh, we missed this one. There's alcohol. Wine, I think, is what's over there. That could definitely play into a fall risk. So, and then letter R, transfers from sitting to standing on a chair which is not stable. Oh, you did get that one, the rolling chair. So, and Scott mentioned this about the gravity. So if we clean all of this up and we address everything, it can still happen. We can still have falls. And just a little plug for us, we are here because that's what we do. We help folks whenever they have traumatic falls or injuries, and we do have programs to help with those kind of things. So that's there in Encompass. Okay, so we're going to try to identify some potential needs for our loved ones. We're going to first look at physical needs, and what we know is that 6 out of 10 adults in the United States have chronic medical conditions, and 4 out of 10 have more than 2. So when these things start to combine, we can start to see issues with being able to complete our activities of daily living and things like that. So first one here is personal care. So things like bathing, washing your hair, dressing. If we start to see our loved ones struggling with that, what do we do? So that's where I'm going to probably refer you to the Green Book. We can look at first, is there a person in your family that can help with those things? And if not, where do we go to get that kind of help? So we can get trained aides for that. Scott worked in the home health world for a long long time, so maybe you have more to say.
Well, I'll go with the green book. There's custodial care and then there's skilled care. Custodial care is not covered by any insurances unless it's long-term care insurance, and it's you hire someone and they can come in and help with the baby. One of the things that worries me about this statement is the family helping baby. Okay, I will openly admit I will get a second job to pay for my mom to get care. I'm not going to ever get my mama back. I'll say that right now. I know my limitations. I also get very concerned of someone that says I can do it. And I see this with spouses, older spouses, all the time. No one's taking care of my wife. No one's taking care of my husband. I'm doing it. Helping someone shower when they have a broken arm and they're a teenager is one thing. Helping someone shower that is having difficulty ambulating, safety issues, it's a different story, and it can put two people at risk versus one. Custodial care is not always cheap. Let me rephrase that. It's never cheap, but it's not always available also. But I do worry about the superhero mindset of spouses. I come across it all the time. I'm going to do this. And the care you give for your parent, I do not care how old you are the child. It does not matter. You can cash those Social Security checks. You can go to your retirement. You can go to your 85th high school reunion. Mom's still mom, dad's still dad, you're still the kid. So there can be some difficulty with parents accepting the help also. When it comes to custodial care, I'm a firm believer in calling everybody and seeing what they have to say. What are their rates? What are their availability? What can they do? There is 5 personal care companies that I can think of off the top of my head just in Center County. On the other side of that, a person may be eligible for skilled care, which in the home health world means that there is a reason that they need a nurse or a therapist to follow them. In that situation, they do have to be homebound, and it does have to be physician ordered and physician followed. Not everyone qualifies for that. If somebody's getting up and around, let's say even physical therapy. Well, if you can make it to outpatient physical therapy, then you're not appropriate for it. And it's something to discuss with the physician because it is physician ordered. But those can be some really hard conversations to have with your parents. I want someone to come in and help you. I'm fine. Leave me alone. And the sooner you have those conversations, normally the better.
I think this one kind of ties in with the same as far as those private duty aids and things. So, but it might be maybe they're doing fine with certain activities of daily living, but they're struggling with vacuuming the floor. That's one of the biggest things that I heard. I used to do a lot of home visits and admissions type thing, and that was one of the things. I can dust and I can do my dishes, but boy, that vacuum cleaner, it really gets them. So just recognizing when it's getting to be too much for them, and then finding those resources to help them. Delivery services are wonderful. I never really thought about how much work it is to go to the grocery store until I started doing the online, and I didn't have to do that anymore. So I just pull up, somebody puts the groceries in, and I go home, and then you still have to unload them. So that's another thing, that's a lot of work for some of these folks that are having trouble getting around or, carrying something while you're using a walker. So, those delivery services and things may be something to consider. Meals, if we start to notice that we're not eating very nutritious meals or they're just tired of eating alone, we might start to see weight changes and things like that. So just keep an eye on that, and what are some options would be meals that are served at senior centers so that they get that social piece, and sometimes that's really important for folks to be able to have that drive to want to eat. And then meal delivery programs, like the Meals on Wheels if they qualify. There are some other programs like Mom's Meals out there. I'm not sure if all of that's in the resource guide, but it's definitely worth.
I'm not sure if Mom's Meals is in there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a national program that they're delivered through the mail. But just keeping an eye on that. Money management. So we might notice if we're finding bills that aren't being paid, or they're late or not being paid at all, or just stacks and stacks of mail that's not getting opened. There's sometimes forms that are difficult for folks to understand, so we need to make sure that we are reaching out for help with that. This particular resource that I got this from goes kind of family first. So if you have somebody that is in the family that can manage that, that's great. Or otherwise, you might want to talk to a financial advisor. Or I know from my past, I've worked with rep pays if that's something that the person would want to do, the individual. So that's where you can pay somebody to pay the bills. It's like, I think $35 a month or something through the Advocacy Alliance. So that's a resource out there. And then healthcare. So if we start to have trouble remembering to take our medications, or missing appointments, or if there is a need for a skilled nurse to visit routinely, then we could look into home health services that Scott mentioned. Another thing with the medications, jumping ahead here, sorry, but there are some pharmacies that will do pill packs, which really is a huge help for a family if you're filling pill packs. So that's something to look into as well. I'm not sure, I'm not from here, so I don't know what pharmacies locally, but there are some that can deliver them right to you as well. So, other things that we may run into, vision changes. So we're going to talk about the naturally occurring changes that you see when we age, and not every person will have this. There are people that see just fine that are in their 90s, but this first picture here is reduced contrast sensitivity. So you can tell here how it's so blurry and hard to see where the step ends and where the next one begins, and that's obviously a huge risk for a fall. We might have difficulty going from light to dark environments and being able to see. This shows you what the floaters look like. I've heard of floaters, but I never really knew what they looked like. So that could be floating around in somebody's field of vision. Decreased depth perception. Again, that's going to be a risk for those falls. And reduced ability to see colors. So this is what we see at the eye doctor when we go in. And then decreased tear production. Yes.
What I'd like to point out with this is not something your loved one's going to come and say, by the way, I'm having depth perception problems. I'm having difficulty seeing. This is something that the caregivers and loved ones need to be mindful and kind of play Sherlock Holmes with it. Very few people are willing to accept, and definitely don't advertise their decline. I'm fine, no matter what, I'm fine. So these are some of the topics to be mindful, to pay attention to see. Also, they may not notice. How many folks have went to get their glasses, their eyes examined, and 2 years later, they're like, oh boy, we got to change the prescription. How you've been walking around. That's what I do. So a lot of these topics, it is a matter of playing that detective and empowering you to play that detective. It's just something to think about. May not be the case, may not be a concern. But for that toolbox, these are just a few things to think about what's going on.
And that's actually the next one here is, what do we look for? So frequently bumping into objects or brushing into them while we're moving around. So when we're thinking about that mobility, or having difficulty walking on irregular surfaces, they're not picking up on those little changes. Stepping hesitantly, so if we're really cautious with those steps, or going up and down stairs cautiously. Hopefully we do that anyway. Foot shuffling can sometimes be a sign of a vision impairment too, or missing objects, or overreaching them. So if we're going for something and we're not getting it. indicators that this is impacting their activities of daily living. Going too far, sorry. So if we're really straining, maybe watching TV and things like that, difficulty identifying faces or objects, or frequently having trouble. I keep doing that. I'm so sorry. Do you have anything to say about any of that? Because I keep messing it up.
No, it's just a matter of that detective work.
Yeah. So the one that I learned about recently is with eating and drinking. Our occupational therapist actually told me about whenever they lose vision on half of their vision, their field of vision. So sometimes they only will eat the food on one half of their plate because they literally cannot see that other half. So, or if we're having trouble, again, like depth perception, getting the food onto the spoon or the fork, those can be signs. And then also if we're really having trouble with readings, I keep thinking of my dad. He wears his reading glasses now. So yes, so those would be the signs. Now I can finally move to the next one. Signs of an emergency. So there are some things that could happen that we do need to get help right away. So if it's a sudden change, like Scott said, those naturally occurring changes are going to be over time. But if it is something all of a sudden everything's blurry, flashes of light, we've got eye pain, double vision, the redness or swelling of the eye or eyelid. I guess that's some kind of an acute issue as well. So we need to get those checked out. And our recommendation is to make sure that we keep getting regular eye exams. It's recommended that anyone over the age of 65 have an exam every 1 to 2 years. If we're diabetic, we definitely need to make sure that we're getting in there to keep an eye on that.
And with that, what I'd like to say is, if you have your eye doctor, they're going to tell you when to come back. It's not McEye exam. You go to your doctor, they say, I'd like to see you in a year, in 2 years, in 6 months. There's other eye problems. So I always love the blanket statements of 1 to 2 years. Well, my doctor said they want to see me in 2 months. He obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. I get to wait 2 years. No, listen to your eye doctor. Listen to the specialist. If they say dad needs to come back in 30 days, then let's bring him back in 30 days.
And another thing about our Encompass Health. So I really enjoyed my time I spent with our occupational therapist because she did a great job of explaining what we do when somebody comes to us, because we do see a lot of folks with stroke and that can affect the vision. Whenever somebody comes into Encompass, we always do a routine eye exam, and then our team develops a plan specifically for that patient to see how we can help them to either adapt or to recover some of the abilities. This next one I think is pretty self-explanatory. So, signs of hearing loss. So we're having trouble hearing on the phone, difficulty following the conversations, asking to repeat things. The TV volume is so loud that other people are complaining. I actually went into a home and I knocked on the door and the guy didn't hear me, but luckily his daughter was there and she let me in and he said, "Oh, I didn't hear you because I was listening to the TV." And he had a hearing aid in that the TV plays through his hearing aid, and I thought that was just the neatest thing. So that's out there. If you have somebody that's blaring your eardrums out, listening to the TV. So if we have trouble understanding speech because of black background noise, that's another sign that we have something going on. Or if they're thinking that somebody's mumbling, other people are mumbling, it's not them. And difficulty hearing higher pitched voices. And again, we recommend that you would have them see an audiologist, get that checked out, and see if they do need hearing aids. And then cognition. Anything that we have going on as far as our memory and how the brain is functioning, that's what we're looking at here. If we are forgetting things more often, forgetting appointments, losing your train of thought. I do that all the time. Or if they're starting to feel increasingly overwhelmed. There's my mouse. I can't find my mouse. It's on the other screen. But if they have trouble making decisions or making a plan, that can be a sign that there's something going on with that cognition. Even finding their way around familiar places can be a sign, or impulsive behavior, or poor judgment. And the one thing to keep in mind is that if there is a change in cognition, it isn't always going to be the same diagnosis. I think for me, I have Alzheimer's in my family. That's a big scare for me. But there can be other things that are going on. And the one that comes to mind is the urinary tract infection. Is there something that's curable that we can get checked out and get them back to their normal selves? Another one could be medications. We hear a lot about polypharmacy now, where we're getting, that other slide said, we've got all these different problems, and then they get all these different medications to go along with them, and maybe there's an interaction going on. So we need to keep an eye on that. Sometimes this goes along with that infection, but if we've got our blood chemistry off, that could affect the cognition. Problems with hormones or vitamin deficiencies. And then there's also delirium that can happen, especially to older folks who are hospitalized, that can resolve itself. And then there's also psychiatric conditions that can cause that as well.
When Jess had mentioned about the UTI, I have a personal story here. As a nurse, I went and saw my grandmother. I was working home health, and she was one of my patients, and I got to choose who I saw. So I went and I saw my grandma. I did the assessment. Life was great, and it was wonderful. 2 days later, a nurse came in and yelled at me. She said, "This young lady I went and visited, she said it's burned while she urinated for the last week, and you saw her 2 days ago, and it was fine." I said, "Well, that's my grandmother. Let me call." I called my grandmother, and I said, "Gran, why didn't you tell me that?" She goes, "Well, there's things you don't tell your grandson." So that's the last time I've been involved medically with my family. And sometimes that can be a real struggle with helping your parents, because you are the child. And I always encourage people to find a physician that your parents can communicate with and they like, and gives them the right time. If they do not have a physician that they do not trust, they don't communicate, they're not open with, find a new doctor. There's plenty of them out there. And sometimes it does take finding a few. I've gone through 3 PCPs in the last 10 years because they just go to different places. But I keep going until I find one that I like and I trust. And that can be a huge hurdle when it comes to helping your parents. It doesn't mean you get to go back in the exam room if they don't want you there. But you have to trust that they're communicating with them. And that open communication can help alleviate or at least pinpoint some of the problems. So as a child taking care of a parent, understand you may get the watered down version of the truth because they don't want you to worry about them.
One more thing that's on this list that could cause issues with the cognition is injury. So if we have some kind of an injury to the brain or stroke, something like that, that could cause a change in cognition. And I keep bringing up the strokes with what we see often. And this was something new for me, was the speech therapy, because all of my other jobs that I've had, I think of speech therapy and I think of swallowing. And what kind of food are they eating, and then we move on. But there's so much more to it than that. Our speech therapists are working with folks to help with their language skills and helping them to connect the wires, I guess you could say, with communication. So there is a lot more to it than just the swallowing, which they do as well. But we want to try to improve cognitive skills and teach safe swallowing as well. Okay. Emotional. Okay, so as our loved ones are aging, we know that they're experiencing a lot of changes. Sometimes it's the loss of loved ones or coping with serious illnesses. So we need to make sure that we're able to have those conversations with them to address those kind of issues. So things that we want to watch out for with that would be mood changes. You know, if they start to experience some kind of depression, anxiety type thing, feeling flat or having trouble with positive emotions, difficulty sleeping can be a sign of some kind of emotional problems. And overthinking things, being obsessed with things sometimes can be other signs as well. And then when folks do come to us, we also have a psychology available. But yes, we do want to be aware. And I think with COVID and the isolation that we've been under, this is a lot more prevalent now than ever, is having those down moments. So options for enhancing aging in place. We already kind of talked about that home safety check. So we want to make sure that our environment is safe so that we can prevent any kind of falls as much as possible. Prioritizing your health. So with that, we're talking about making sure that we get to our appointments, taking our medication, doing what we can to stay healthy. That could even be staying active, whatever active looks like for your loved one. I know that, do you guys have, or you're not here, I think they have some exercise things at different senior centers. Sometimes it's going to be the exercise for some folks is getting up and going to the bathroom and coming back. But as long as they're still doing it, that's the important part, because if you stop doing it, it's that old saying, like if you don't do it, you lose it. So we want to see as much activity as we can. Befriending technology. That sounds scary. I know my grandmother, she would do anything in the world but touch a computer. Like that's just not her friend. I was telling you about the VCR. Like that's a big thing. But there's so many neat things out there to help with our aging parents. Trying to think of which ones are the one that I have is the Ring video doorbell. So if they're willing and able to use it, being able to say, instead of trying to get up to, to go to the door to answer the door, say, just go ahead and do this, I'll get it, if it's a package, or letting somebody in that way. So there's that. And then we've got all these smart devices. So we know we can get the button if somebody calls. Sorry, got distracted. There it is. Oh, with the video doorbell, I did not know you can get a voice-activated thermostat as well. I thought that was pretty neat. And they make protection for on the stove that can turn it off if it's left unattended for a certain period of time. I did it again. Wanting to push the words down the machine, but home monitoring systems, and then social media platforms. I keep thinking of my gram, but really, there's seniors out there that are just they're more tech savvy now than they were before. So doing things like Zoom and Facebook and being engaged that way, I think is a great option for families to stay in touch. Going over to those GPS, they have GPS watches to help with things. And then we talked about the online grocery orders and getting those kind of things delivered. Also, telehealth is another thing that can be beneficial if it's difficult to get into the offices. And then planning ahead for care, making sure that you guys know what your loved one wants as far as medical care, if there is an emergency, those kind of things are important to have in place. I know it's difficult to have those conversations, but I think it's more difficult, and I've witnessed it in my own family, to have to make a decision when you don't know the answer of what they would want. So that's really important to get those things in mind. There are some options to do things like power of attorney online, and then I think the best option is to talk to an elder law attorney to make sure you have everything done the right way. When to ask for help. So if we start to have close calls or new difficulties, if we start to have the chronic medical conditions that are worsening, difficulty recovering. So that can be something as simple as a cold or the flu, but it just really knocks them down. They lose a lot of their mobility. And that's some of the stuff that we see sometimes where, when they're laying in a hospital bed for so long, and then they start to not be able to take care of themselves as well. You need to get some extra help with that. And then when we're having those difficulties with activities of daily living, socially and in that emotional side, if we start to notice that they're not interacting with their friends as much, physically you could see weight loss, weight gain, frailty, or disheveled appearance. I think that was me this morning. When my alarm didn't go off. Do you have anything?
I would just say, as I said in the beginning, every toolbox is different. And I think that's the biggest thing is you have to empower yourself to realize your toolbox and needs are different than the next person's. I love ACAP. I love people coming together and discussing that. It's rather new. I mean, if you really think about our society, the family either took care of their seniors or they didn't, but they were very siloed and they didn't get out and discuss it. And I think coming to events like this is very important for you to build your own plan. The communication with your senior, what their wants are, what their needs are going to be, being prepared. If my name's Dorothy, I'm prepared for the yellow brick road. But the reality is I may be going through the scarecrow town. And the thing is you need to be prepared for the perfect and the less than perfect. And empower yourself with that, with your loved one. Take credit for what you're doing and the planning you're doing. I will tell you, we brought some stuff in over there. I brought in notebooks because it's great to take notes. I brought in pill boxes because planning for pills is great. I brought in a shower caddy because sometimes getting a shower is a big deal. Then I brought in stress balls because taking care of your parents are not stressful at all. I am a firm believer in caregivers that do not take care of themselves are eventually not around to take care of their loved ones. It doesn't mean you get to go to Paris every other weekend and completely dip out. But 10 minutes of reading, a good lunch, a good dinner, a little bit of alone time is not a bad thing.
And don't be shy about asking for help.
Most definitely. The fact that y'all are here is impressive. It means that you're committed to your task. We need to know tomorrow's task is going to be. It's a beautiful thing. I kind of gave the end speech, and we're not done yet.
I think I'm losing my Yeah, this was really just, having the conversations with your loved one to kind of schedule a time for it and make sure that it's a conversation and not a lecture. And just share, ask open-ended questions so that they can give their opinion as well, and then just kind of circle back around and revisit that. So I really appreciate you guys having us, and Scott did a great job wrapping it up there. So.
Well, and one thing I want to say about this conversation, let them lead. Let them lead. And if you spin it around anyone here who has kids, I have children, and if any of my kids came to me and said, Dad, this is what we're doing, I'm not letting them choose where we eat lunch if you come at me that way. If they come at me with, where would you like to eat lunch? Great, because I'm still the dad. So regardless of the age, they're still the parent. So you can present some of the obstacles and some of the issues, but if you, I don't know your loved ones, but I know when I'm told what I'm going to do, I'm going to prove to you real quick I'm going to do the other thing. So it's often a matter of planting seeds and let them understanding some of the things that you need from them without being demanding. It's the planting little seeds and let the parent be the parent and say, I've got the best idea. I think we need to go set up a trust, or I need to talk to someone about do not resuscitate, or I think that I've had such a good life. I'm willing to let someone come in and help me bathe. Any of those things. If you plant those seeds and let them lead it, you don't have the potential for the headbutt. Because I butt heads with my kids all the time, and they're grown. So.
And then just sometimes it's going to be a compromise, and also to recognize that change doesn't happen overnight. So little wins are big wins. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Oh, yeah.
Any questions? Any thoughts? Any tips? Any critiques? How about online? Did we have anyone come from online?
No,
Okay.
we did not hear from anybody.
Yes, sir.
I'm not really familiar with Encompass Health.
Okay.
Is it, where is it located? What levels of care? I mean,
In Encompass Health, we're right here in Pleasant Gap. We are an inpatient level rehab hospital. And by that, I mean we have a physician on site every day to oversee medical needs that are necessary. Everyone with us does 3 hours of therapy, 5 days a week. Our number one goal is maximizing people's potential and getting them back home. Now, with the 3 hours of therapy a day, it is tailored around the individual and their needs. Today, I talked to one young lady that broke both of her legs. Also talked to someone who had a recent stroke. So we deal with their needs at their level. And we work on their goals. If they tell me I want to go home, great, that's what we want. Our goal is to return people home. The young lady with broken legs, her goal is to go to the bathroom without help. Well, when you can't stand on either of your legs, that's a difficult task. But we mold it around them. I say it 7 times a day. Eating breakfast is not therapy unless you can't eat breakfast. Then it's therapy. So we build it around the people. We have a Joint Commission certified stroke program, cardiac program, pulmonary program, brain injury program, an orthopedic program. We are a higher level than skilled nursing facilities, what we used to call nursing homes back in my youth. They get about 1 hour of therapy, and their stays are normally 21 to 28 days. That's an average, where our average stay is just under 2 weeks, 7 to 10 days. That does not mean that no one graduates early, and it also doesn't mean on day 10 we say, well, you're done. Time to go. We work with that individual. We have physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and Jess had said earlier, we're both LPNs. We've done patient care, and we knew that speech therapy was so someone could eat lunch and maybe they needed puree and everything. Coming to Encompass, it's a whole new world because we watch them work with memory techniques, word finding techniques, and these may be cognitive issues from stroke, from Parkinson's, from a brain injury, but they do a lot of cognitive training and therapy that until I worked at Encompass, I didn't realize it was that big of a scope.
We got to go and follow the therapists around whenever we did our training. And that was the strangest thing for me. We went into this guy's room, and I'm with the speech therapist, and we sat there and watched him eat a cheeseburger and talked about restaurants. And I walked out of the room. I'm like, what did we just do? I don't understand. And it was cognition. It wasn't anything to do about the cheeseburger. It was, can he have this conversation and really that verbal communication. So that was neat.
Now, for people to come to us, we can accept referrals from home. If anyone has any questions, I'll leave my card. You can call and say, look, Dad's been falling. Mom's, not getting up, not moving around. We do work with all the major insurances. Some of them take a little longer to get authorization, but we can accept referrals straight from home. We will go to someone's home and talk with them. I had a daughter call me, said, Dad needs you so bad. Went out and did an assessment of Dad, and he needed us so bad. He could not go to and from the bathroom without being a severe trip hazard. Convincing him that he needed us was a different story. And I visited him 3 times, and finally he said, let's do this. And he walked into our hospital with a walker, not steady at all. 2 weeks later, he walked out with a signal point cane, walked to the car without a concern. And those are the things that have a positive impact. This guy was at home. There was no hospital stay. There was nothing like that. He was at home. But his Monday turned to Tuesday, turned to 3 years, and his decline was slow. So sometimes it takes a little bit of that, hey, why don't you come on in and get a tune-up, for lack of better words. But the therapy we do, again, is built around that person, what their goals are. If their goals are to walk from here to the door and back, we all walked in here. That's not a big goal, unless it is. If I have a difficulty walking to there is a big task. And they say about 300 to 500 feet is the standard household distance to be able to live in your home without an extra level of safety concern. We have to build it around that individual and their goals.
Could you hold up that resource book again?
sure
Because
can.
I think that's a really critical
Well, and
resource.
I'll tell you, Center County, this has everything from home health agencies to Meals on Wheels to custodial care to just throw something here, personal care homes, inpatient rehab hospitals, which, by the way, Encompass Health is the only one in Center County. It has a lot there. I suggest people go to this with a highlighter and call folks. Call folks before you need the services. If there's potential, build that toolbox. Highlight people. If you call someone, weirdly, some of the companies anymore don't have folks just sitting waiting for the phone to ring. That you may need to leave a message and they'll call back. I don't know if y'all have heard there's staffing shortages everywhere. I said it's not a staffing shortage. This is the new normal. But call places. If a personal care home isn't all anywhere on your radar, go visit them. Don't wait until it's emergent to say, boy, what are we doing? We literally get at least 1 to 2 referrals a week out of the emergency room where people just show up and say, I can't take care of mom anymore. Please. And they may not have any medical reason for admission. Now, Encompass, we love to help those folks because we love to get them back home. But that's the key with that toolbox is building what ifs.
Right.
What if is a big problem when folks get less than young.
And you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. Well, like you said about Encompass, we've been here since 1983. Did I get that right? Wow.